7 must-know video tricks for the Canon EOS R5.
All right, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about my 7 must-know video tricks. Now these are going to be some basic tricks, some more advanced tricks, and we're going to be talking about the tricks using the EOS R5. But fret not, my friends, if you use a different camera system, all you have to do is know where the menu settings I'm talking about in this video are on your camera system, and you can apply these tricks, well, the tricks that involve adjusting menu settings to your camera system as well. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, before we get started on the tricks, for those of you who just picked up an EOS R5 and you're not too familiar with the video settings, I have a video right there where I talk about the settings I use to record my videos for YouTube, and I also go over a lot of the basics. So if you want to get to know the menu and understand what's going on, check it out. All right, let's talk about some tricks to improve your videography skills. All right, so trick number 1, pick up a cage with a handle. Now you can pick up a cage and a handle relatively inexpensive these days. You can even find them on the used market from time to time, but it definitely helps. I mean, from a superficial perspective, it just makes the camera look a lot cooler. When you shoot clients, they're like, ooh, you know? But on a practical level, and the more important thing is you can attach a monitor to it. You can attach lav mics, shotgun mics, other accessories, lights, that kind of thing. So it really helps with your video production, especially if you're shooting YouTube videos. You can put a light up here, you can put a mic, shotgun mic, and it just allows you to mount to everything. These cages usually come with more cold shoe mounts, so it allows you just to build up your rig and film things. And it certainly makes YouTube filming a lot easier with a cage. Now, if you are buying an R5 and an R6 and you're looking to buy a cage with small rig, there is an issue. This cage is fine, it works, but paired up with a handle, if you put it on the other way around, it does scratch up the R5, and that certainly is a problem. I have a video about it right there, also linked down below if you want to go check it out. So I don't fully recommend the small rig cage unless you really want to pay attention to what you're doing, and you don't have to like restrict yourself from flipping the handle around the other way. So I mean, there's certain issues with this cage, but the other major benefit with the cage is your camera movements. If you're filming like this, you're kind of limited to what you can do, but with a cage you have the handle on top, so you can really articulate your wrist and get nice smooth motions. You can even it becomes easier to move in and out. You can hang the camera on 2 fingers and move it forwards and backwards. You can also, with the handle, you can get nice and close to the ground, and you can pan across the ground or glide across the ground to a certain object. So the handle really helps to unlock a lot of movements that you otherwise would have a little bit of trouble doing regularly. So yeah, cage, definitely a win. All right, so if you're picking up on R5, probably you're not gonna just put it in auto mode and start recording video. You wanna actually start recording video and paying attention to your settings. And if you're doing that, chances are you probably wanna start shooting in log. You have regular CLOG here, and you have CLOG 3 at the moment with the updates. But if you're gonna start shooting log, here's a trick for getting exposure with log if you don't have a gray card or a light meter and that kind of thing. So on the back here, what I've done is I've put 3 settings here in the My Menu option. We have zebra settings, manual focus peaking settings, and movie Servo AF. Now, there's a reason why the zebra settings and manual focus peaking settings are in the same menu, because you can't have them both on at the same time with this camera. It's either one or the other. So if you have your zebras on, you can't manually focus the lens and have focus peaking on. And if you're using cinematic lenses, you definitely want that on. But first, let's talk about the zebra settings trick. So now let's go into the zebra settings, and if you scroll down, zebra 1 level, set it to 40%. Now the thinking behind this is that if you're trying to expose for an 18% gray card, which is the average skin tone, some people darker, some people lighter, obviously, but on average, if you expose for 18% gray, you'll get a correct exposure. And when these cameras do auto exposure, they're usually trying to expose for 18% gray. So this is a cool little trick. If you set the zebras to 40% and then you manually adjust your focus, or manually adjust your exposure, once you start seeing the zebra lines on someone's face, you know that now that CLOG setting is exposed for 18% gray. So chances are you're going to have a correct exposure. Now you might have to tinker with that, move it this way or that way, depending on the scene, depending on the skin tone of the people in the scene and that kind of thing. But as a general rule, that's a good trick for exposing CLOG. Now you know. All right, so now let's talk about focus peaking. If we go back into the menu here and we try and go to focus peaking, you can see it's grayed out because the zebra settings are on. So we have to go turn off the zebra settings and go into focus peaking. That's why I keep both those settings in the menu next to each other so I can change it quickly. Now, focus peaking is pretty cool. What you can do is you can turn it on. You can mess with the settings. I have it set to high, and you can set the color of the focus peaking. So what focus peaking is, if you're using cinema lenses, most cinema lenses don't have autofocus, or if you're using vintage lenses, all vintage lenses don't have autofocus. And what focus peaking does is it puts like whatever color you pick, suppose it's red. If you're focusing on the eyes will start to like glow red when they're in focus, and when they're out of focus, you'll see them normally. So wherever you see the red outline in the image on the back LCD screen, that's what's in focus. So if you're shooting a video, for example, with vintage lenses, you know, you can do your focus and then you can sort of watch the screen, and as long as your face is red, you're in focus. The moment you become clear again, you're out of focus. So that's a cool setting, especially if you want to get into shooting cinematic footage with cinematic lenses. And yeah, so you got to get used to manually focusing, and focus peaking definitely helps with that. All right, number 4, we have Movie Servo Autofocus. Now this is one of those settings that not a lot of people talk about, but it's super handy, especially if you're trying to take some cinematic footage. Now, for those of you familiar with Canon, anything that says servo on it means continuous autofocus. So the autofocus is continually going. And obviously when you turn that off, the autofocus stops. So the benefit to this setting in video mode is if you turn it off, let's say you're doing a talking head bit. So you have someone's head here, they're talking to the camera, and all of a sudden they walk off camera. The camera doesn't focus on the background. It just stays locked on to whatever it was focused on. And if that subject moves out of the way, the background is blurry. Now, if you turn Movie Servo Autofocus on, if I step out of the shot, the camera will automatically focus on the next thing, which is the background. So depending on what you want to do, maybe you want the camera to focus on the background, maybe you don't want it to focus on the background. So Movie Servo Autofocus is a little trick you can use to keep your subjects in focus and keep those backgrounds nice and blurry. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is rack focus. Now, this is like a little trick. It's kind of subtle. A lot of people don't even notice this, but in big Hollywood movies, rack focusing is super important in terms of telling story or creating a mood or a feeling and that kind of thing. And what a rack focus is basically focusing from one thing in the foreground to something in the background. Or let's say you have two people standing and you focus from one person to the person behind, back to the person in front. So there's a bunch of different ways you can use rack focus to create mood or emphasize mood and create drama and that kind of thing. So if you go into the autofocus settings on the back of the EOS R5, tab 3, you'll see a setting that says Movie Servo AF Speed. So if you adjust the autofocus speed from fast to slow, you'll get a faster rack focus and a slower rack focus. Now, I have a whole video talking about this right there. I talk about how to adjust your rack focus, and I talk about how to adjust the sensitivity of your focus points and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of good information about that. So if you don't know about rack focus and adjusting focus speed, definitely check out that video after you watch this one and leave a comment. All right, next. Okay, so here's a cool little trick that I use with my R5 all the time, and it probably won't help you if you're shooting in RAW mode, because RAW you can just adjust everything in post, but if you're shooting in CLOG or shooting in regular video mode, this definitely will help you. If you go to the menu, red menu, tab 2, highlight tone priority D+. If you turn that on, what it'll do is the camera will prioritize the bright spots in your video, and it'll try and preserve the detail in those highlights, which is pretty cool. Now, the downside to this is that it'll open up the ISO in order to do so. So you'll shoot at a higher ISO in order to save the highlights, which means that if you want to shoot with a really shallow depth of field, which is kind of what we're doing here, if the camera will focus, there we go, a nice slow rack focus. So you can see that the background gets completely blurred with a shallow depth of field. Now, obviously, if you bump up the ISO, then you have to bring up your aperture in order to compensate, which opens things up and you don't get that nice blurry background. So if you're using this highlight tone priority, what you want to do is put a variable ND filter on your camera, And what that does is it allows you to adjust the amount of light coming into the lens, which allows you to make it dimmer so you can still shoot at a wide open aperture. So for example, right here, we have a VND. No, we don't have a VND on there. All right, so here we have a VND filter. And if we turn it one way, it blocks a lot of the light coming through the lens, so you'll need a higher ISO to get anything out of that shot. We turn it the other way, it blocks some of the light, but not all of the light. So depending on what you want to do, VNDs are super handy, and if you want to use that highlight tone priority, these definitely help. All right, we've made it to our 7th trick, and if you enjoy this video, definitely subscribe to the channel and leave some comments down below. Let me know which is your favorite trick. I'm working hard on growing this channel, so your support, definitely appreciated. So the 7th trick is kind of interesting. We're going to go into the menu here, and you go to tab number 3, and at the bottom you see clarity. Now I have my clarity bumped up to +2, and what that does is, if you understand Photoshop, you know what high pass is, so it adds contrast around the different elements of your shot. So it's not going to necessarily create sharpness here, but it will create sharpness here between the lighter tones and darker tones and my skin tone and the hat and that kind of thing. So clarity kind of is a way of sharpening without sharpening. Just if you think about high pass, that'll definitely like clear it up for you. So I increase my clarity to +2, and then what I do is I put a Tiffin Pro Mist filter on the front of my camera. Right now I have a Tiffin Pro Mist 1/8 filter on my EOS R, and we're filming this with a 35 1.4 at 1.4. So it's going to add a certain softness and a little glow to that light. So the rationale here is that the clarity adds sharpness to the video. So everything looks a little too sharp or clinically sharp, or the edges are really crisp. And then I put the Pro Mist filter on there to kind of soften it out a little bit. But when I soften it out, I get that nice glow. So I use a Pro Mist 1/8 for pretty much all my YouTube videos. I also have a Pro Mist 1/2, which I use from time to time, and that really adds a lot of glow. So here's what a Pro Mist 1/2 looks like. And this is what a Pro Mist 1/8 looks like. And of course, this is all with clarity up at +2. So that's a cool little trick. I use that all the time. So it sharpens my videos and softens my videos at the same time, but it softens my videos in the right ways as opposed to just looking soft. So that's awesome. Okay, before we close out this video, I just want to give you a warning on a product you shouldn't buy. I'm just unscrewing it here from the camera right now. This is one of those filters you see advertised on Instagram all the time. It's a Radiant FX filter, and it's got those little lines in it, and it's supposed to create streaky light. And clearly, it's been on the camera for this entire video, all the talking head bits. Did you see any streaky lines, streaky lights? This filter is junk. It doesn't work. Just saved you 50 bucks. You're welcome. Don't buy this crap. And with that being said, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Those tips and tricks should help you become a better and more creative videographer, cinematographer, whatever you want to call it. And if you like this kind of stuff, definitely subscribe to the channel. Would really appreciate it. If you're looking for more tips and tricks and tutorials on EOS R5, links down below so you can check those out as well. With that being said, peace out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.